It is early Tuesday, August 21st, and this is a special 28storms.com update on newly declared Tropical Depression 9 located to the east of the Leeward Islands. We have been anticipating the development of Tropical Depression 9 for the past several days, and our first forecast track was issued on Sunday. We took the storm steadily into the northeast Caribbean, followed up by a track near day 5 somewhere immediately to the south of the Hispaniola coastline. This was the updated graphic as of yesterday afternoon. There were only some minor modifications made, but overall the 4 to 5 day forecast was relatively the same, with the track over toward Hispaniola and eastern Cuba. Fast forwarding now to this early Tuesday morning, this is now the first official forecast package from the National Hurricane Center, and as of the 5 a.m. Eastern Time advisory, maximum sustained winds of Tropical Depression 9 are 35 miles per hour, is moving off toward the west at nearly 20 miles per hour, and tropical storm warnings and watches are in effect for all of the Leeward Islands, the Virgin Islands, and also Puerto Rico. And if that weren't enough, the Hurricane Center is forecasting soon-to-be Isaac to become a hurricane shortly after arriving in the Northeast Caribbean, and it's forecast to strengthen into a 110 mile per hour Category 2 hurricane, just shy of major Category 3 hurricane status if it stays immediately to the south of the more rugged terrain of Hispaniola and eastern Cuba. This is still a highly uncertain forecast because any deviation to the north into that higher terrain could disrupt this tropical cyclone, and the storm will be a little bit weaker than currently forecast, and this could also disrupt the 5 to 7 day forecast possibilities. This is a look at the 6Z run of the tropical model suite, and we have a very strong consensus over Hispaniola, although some of the more reliable models are ever so gradually to the west in the 4 to 5 day range, and then some of these more northerly models are being discounted at this time because they are showing too much of a northerly motion in the short term. The 6Z run of the GFS ensemble members are all over the place beyond day 5, but there is a pretty strong consensus that the storm will be somewhere near Hispaniola within the next 72 to 96 hours, and thereafter there's still a lot of time for things to change, but the forecast possibilities range anywhere from the southeast Gulf of Mexico to much of the Bahamas, and also furthermore we are still thinking that some of these more easterly solutions are erroneous, and more than likely some of those are in response to the storm just being forecast to be too far to the north in the short term, and as of right now we are pretty confident that it's going to end up somewhere near the southern coast of Hispaniola in the 3 to 4 day range. This is a look at the 6Z intensity model guidance, and we do have a couple model members that are showing some weakening within the next 24 to 72 hours. This looks like a highly unlikely prospect as the storm is becoming increasingly better defined on satellite imagery, and conditions appear favorable for steady intensification all the way up until the time the storm possibly begins to interact with the terrain of Hispaniola and Cuba. But if it stays ever so gradually or just slightly to the south, then that is where the storm will live up to its maximum potential, and some of the more reliable models are counting on the storm remaining just south, and that is including the LGEM and the ship guidance, and they are clearly showing a favorable environment by ramping up soon to be Isaac into what is going to be a Category 2 or possibly even low-end Category 3 major hurricane. But again, land interaction is going to be the make or break with this system, trying to form into a major hurricane before exiting the Caribbean, and this is also greatly going to impact whether or not we will be dealing with a significant hurricane or perhaps nothing more than a tropical storm for interest out across the southeast United States. This is a regional satellite view of the Atlantic, and you can clearly see Tropical Depression 9 really getting its act together on this early Tuesday morning, and it's still located out into the central Atlantic, but it is starting to near the Lesser Antilles, and that is why tropical storm warnings have had to be issued for the Leeward Islands. We don't have the luxury of viewing visible satellite imagery this early, but even with the standard infrared you can get the good idea that the low-level surface circulation is located very close or directly underneath the latest convective flare-up, and based on this presentation I would not at all be surprised to see Tropical Storm Isaac later on this morning. If not, then possibly in the early afternoon at the latest, as the hurricane hunters are scheduled to fly out into TD9 later today. And this is another look at the enhanced infrared, just a more zoomed in version, and this is by far the best convection that has developed directly over the surface circulation since 94L was declared several days ago, and it is becoming increasingly evident that this tropical feature is starting to overcome some of the dry air that has been situated directly to its north. The regional water vapor imagery shows a fairly well-established outflow pattern starting to take shape with very favorable upper-level winds aloft, and this is due to the tropical upper tropospheric trough and associated areas of upper-level low heights situated to the northwest. And as long as these upper-level lows keep a safe distance, they're going to help ventilate this entire area to the southeast. And the same can be said for these upper-level lows that are directly behind TD9 as they continue to plunge over toward the south. Also, as the storm continues to move westward and beyond 50 degrees west longitude, it's going to be moving into an increasingly unstable atmosphere, and that is due to the high octane fuel in the sea surface temperatures as they are warmer out across the Caribbean, so therefore convection or the development of convection will become less of an issue, and it's going to help fight off a lot of that dry air that is still going to be to the northeast of the system. A couple of the latest products from the University of Wisconsin shows the low-level 850 millibar vorticity max continuing to strengthen, and the wind shear streamline analysis confirms the presence of very favorable upper-level ridging located directly above the tropical cyclone, with a lot of southwest vertical wind shear immediately to the northwest of TD9, but this is only going to help to enhance the poleward outflow as that begins to develop once it moves into the more favorable central and eastern Caribbean Sea. This is the vertical wind shear forecast for the next 6 days from the 0Z run of the Canadian CMC model. You can see the upper level ridge currently initialized to the east of the Lesser Antilles, but this upper level ridge is forecast to continue moving west-northwest directly over the Greater Antilles and into the southwest Bahamas. As such, that would be a very favorable environment throughout the forecast period for steady to occasionally rapid intensification, although that is pending any land interaction with Hispaniola and eastern Cuba, so that could be a major fly in the ointment. Also, another interesting thing to point out from a forecaster perspective is that the CMC model has finally shifted westward over the next 3 to 4 days, and it now is in line with the remainder of the model consensus that the storm will pass either very close or directly over Hispaniola within the next 72 to 96 hours. This is something that we've been expecting from the CMC, so it's good to see something verified that was expected, although this is not good news for interest in Hispaniola, as this is going to greatly increase the chances of significant rainfall. Now, whether or not the 5 to 6 day forecast is going to verify, that's a little bit more questionable, as it does have a strengthening hurricane over the northern Bahamas aiming toward the U.S. East Coast, but at least it's a little bit closer to the overall consensus, which at this point really cannot be narrowed down between the Southeast Gulf, extreme South Florida, or the western Bahamas just yet. In terms of the 500 millibar mid-level steering layer, the CMC is showing the trough out across the eastern United States over the next 1 to 2 days, and the main part of this trough is going to steadily lift out, but the western Atlantic ridge fails to build back into the southeast United States. Instead, it stays right along the U.S. eastern seaboard. Therefore, the CMC is showing the hurricane feeling the effects of the troughing left over, and that is why it's suggesting more of a northwest bend in the track toward the Carolinas as we go into the next 5 to 7 days. The 6Z run of the GFS is hot off the presses as it just came out within the last 10 to 15 minutes. But as we go into Wednesday evening, that is when the GFS is forecasting what is likely to be Tropical Storm Isaac making landfall. So interest there should be bracing for the weather conditions to begin to rapidly go downhill during the afternoon hours out in advance of the center crossing the islands. As we continue on into the 3 and 4 day forecast range, we can see that the GFS is forecasting a track near or directly over the lower half of Hispaniola, and it does look as though the higher terrain is influencing the structure of the tropical cyclone, so this could be detrimental to the storm unless the center stays just far enough toward the south. Otherwise, this is the wild card in the forecast, especially for any track beyond Hispaniola, as the intensity will play a vital key in that aspect of the forecast as well. Nevertheless, the GFS does show a bend more toward the northwest once it's over eastern and central Cuba, and as we move on into early next Monday, it's implying a landfall over southeast Florida with the track straight up the Florida Peninsula, but again, this remains to be seen. As of right now, we've gone over the CMC, which is just to the east, and of course now the GFS with a direct hit over the Sunshine State. The most recent 0Z run of the GFS ensemble mean is in fairly good agreement with the latest 6Z run of the operational, and as we see between 72 and 96 hours, it's passing along the southern coast of Hispaniola. Between days 4 and 5, it's starting to make a gradual bend around the subtropical ridge, and it's starting to move toward the Florida Keys. And by day 6, it's starting to exit Cuba. And if it does indeed take this track, we're going to have to evaluate the integrity of the storm structure and whether or not it will be ready to re-intensify after making the long trip over the mountains. Also, from a synoptic standpoint, it's interesting to note that the ensembles are trying to redevelop some ridging out across the U.S. East Coast, and the amount of ridging directly to the north is going to help determine whether or not this gets into the Southeast Gulf or perhaps even parallels the east coast of Florida. This is a synoptic forecast detail that is just too far out to really key in on at this time, so neither one of the two scenarios can be discounted at the moment. I must say, however, that the models in general for the past few days have had a northerly bias with this system, as they have been showing too much in the way of weakening of the Atlantic Ridge. And what is interesting to note is that the latest run of the ECMWF is still in agreement with the GFS that the storm is going to be located near or just to the south of the coast of Hispaniola, but that is where the agreement comes to an end because the European is showing more ridging than what is otherwise indicated by the GFS in the southwest Atlantic and Bahamas. By day 5, we see more ridging extending toward the west into Florida and the southeast Gulf. Therefore, we see a more westerly track of the tropical cyclone, and since it's being held to the south of all of this high terrain, it's allowed to strengthen even more out across the extreme northwest Caribbean. And if this forecast were to verify, we would have a potentially major hurricane moving into the southeast Gulf of Mexico. Furthermore, the ECMWF operational run does have support from its ensemble mean, as the day 9 ensemble mean also has the area of low pressure associated with the hurricane located in the same general position, that being the southeast Gulf. So with all of these variables being considered, this is our 5-day forecast graphic, and we are continuing with the mindset that we've had for the past 2 days, that the general track will be toward the west or just north of due west over the next 4 to 5 days, and this is in relatively good agreement with the first official forecast package that was issued by the National Hurricane Center at 5 a.m. Eastern Time. By day 5, we are mainly taking a blend between the GFS and European solutions. Remember, at this time the GFS is a little bit more toward the north, while the European is a little slower and a bit more toward the south near southeast Cuba. In terms of the intensity, we are a tad more conservative between days 3 through 5 compared to the Hurricane Center, as we do have some fears that land interaction could at least temporarily stunt the intensification process, and a track more toward the north could significantly weaken the storm altogether. We will have to keep a very close watch on that, but as of right now, we do agree that it will stay just to the south of the Greater Antilles. So once again, please stay informed with the latest official information from the National Hurricane Center. You want to use their products for life and death information. This is more so just a secondary source, and we will be providing more videos, discussions, and updates at 28storms.com, our social media outlets, and the Hurricane Tracker app.